I'm thrilled to announce that SoftBank will be investing $100 billion in America, creating 100,000 American jobs at a minimum. And he's doing this because he feels very optimistic about our country since the election.
I'm now excited to commit this $100 billion and 100,000 jobs into the United States. This is double of last time, as President Trump said.
The attraction about Masayoshi Son is there's no Western biography of him. He was the richest man in the world for 3 days at the height of the dot-com bubble. But he's also at the intersection of politics, technology, finance, financial engineering. He's had some fantastic investments. I mean, he invested in Alibaba before it was a household name. He got into Yahoo before it was a household name, and he made billions that way. But even though he's talked a lot about artificial intelligence, he didn't get into deep AI like Sam Altman's ChatGPT or Anthropic or these kind of companies. So he's slightly behind the curve on that.
How and why do you think he missed that? Because he must have been trying to get the meetings and make the investments.
I'm not sure. He did invest in about 2017 in the company which we now know because it's so valuable. It's the most valuable company in the world, called NVIDIA, which is essentially making computer graphics chips, but then had a step jump in quality to produce these extremely sophisticated advanced technology micro chips. And he had about 5% of that company, but he sold in 2019. So the company that is now worth more than $3 trillion, I did say that,
yeah.
$3 trillion, and he had 5% of it, and he sold. So he missed that meteor. And I think one of the reasons is he was just investing in so many other dozens and dozens of companies, you know, from dog walking apps to, you know, and he just missed. Yeah, well, he invested in Uber, yes. He invested in Lyft, even the competitor. I mean, the way to look at it, and I think this book is quite interesting, should be find investors in technology stocks, or investors in general, find it very interesting about how his approach. I mean, it's almost cover every square on the board.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to make money somehow, aren't you?
Because one of the memorable stories in the book is when he goes to see Steve Jobs and essentially takes sort of a prototype of an iPhone back in 2006, 2007, I think this is.
Yeah, it's 5 and 6, yeah, 2005, 6, yeah.
But can you kind of explain to us what he sort of
Well,
does?
this is very interesting because Masayoshi Son, who does like to tell a story, he says and insisted to me, and I questioned him about 5 or 6 times on this, because the relationship with Jobs is very important. I mean, in a sentence, the crucial thing is that he did actually get exclusive distribution for the iPhone in Japan, and that made his mobile phone company. I mean, he'd bought Vodafone Japan, and without the iPhone, you know, that was a great deal for him. But the wrinkle here is that Masayoshi Son says he goes to Steve Jobs with the iPod and says you could actually make this into something more. Now, it's maybe not quite the smartphone, but this concept of having a device which goes beyond just playing music in your ears. And he also claims that he designed the emoticons, etc. Now, there are other people who think that this is, I think the technical term is bullshit. But he insists he had regular conversations. He also says that when he produced the drawing in front of Steve Jobs looked at him and said, you know, I'm not getting into, because he's very secretive, you know, I don't know what this is, but I don't need your shitty drawing. I've got my own ideas. But Masa claims that more than 2 years before the launch of the iPhone, the ubiquitous, unbelievable consumer product, the iPhone, he got a verbal commitment to get exclusivity. I'm not sure that's right either. But I gave him the side of the story. He's a good storyteller.
Pulling it off. And he has quite a significant meeting, age 16, with the head of McDonald's, and I was fascinated by this story.
Den Fujita.
Yeah, can you tell us what happens?
So Den Fujita is the man who went to America. He had worked in MacArthur's, General MacArthur, who was the supreme commander in Asia and then became the kind of commandante in post-war Japan, and oversaw the drafting of a new constitution after the. I mean, Japan was obliterated during the Second World War, and Fujita was a translator, so he had connections in the American military, and he spoke English. He learned English, so he goes to McDonald's in America and says, "Well, I can, give me the franchise for Japan, and I'll sort of Japanize. I mean, don't ask me what Ronald McDonald is." But that was one of the characters. And he becomes Mr. Burger, hamburger in Japan, makes a fortune. And he wrote a book, a sort of self-help book, which was a big bestseller in post-war Japan. And Masa, who wanted to, was fascinated by America, crucially decided to go to America as a student to learn English because he wanted to be global. He was inspired by Fujita. So he wrote to him, he rang up on the sort of payphone, this is his story anyway, and he's badgering Fujita's secretary, and Fujita's very famous. Finally, he decides to get a plane. He's only age 16, and parlays his way into getting a 10-minute meeting with the great man, Mr. McDonald's in Japan. And Fujita says, learn English, go to America, and there we go.
And learn
Bingo.
computer science as well, is that?
Yeah, he talked about computers as well. I mean, again, I've gone with the story, but there's always, I've also gone into the backstory. I do not.
Okay.
This is a biography. There are some things that Masa will not like.
Yeah.
Plenty of embarrassing moments, because he's a human being. He's made big mistakes. But it's a biography. It's not a stenography. So when I did 4 interviews with Masa, I'm not sitting there writing down everything that he says and taking it as face value. With Masayoshi Son, it's taken several iterations from being a software distributor in 1981. He couldn't even get a bank loan, by the way, because he was Korean. He had a mentor who helped him on the loan. Then he goes into because the Japanese economy implodes with the stock market, with the real estate bubble. He gets into investing in America, low interest rates, can borrow easily, gets into the internet. Then he goes into mobile, and then he goes into global investing after, So that's the first thing. He's constantly looking to reinvent himself. But he also wants to prove himself because he's an outsider and he's Korean. He almost wants to be more Japanese than the Japanese. So during the earthquake, the terrible earthquake in Fukushima, he's suddenly talking about, moving thousands of people and, leaving SoftBank and being a great patriot. He invokes Japanese historical figures. So that sense of being on the outside but wanting to be accepted and wanting status is very important. And I think the third point is he does care about money, although his official public profile is very modest. I float my company on the stock exchange. What did you buy? Well, I bought some golf clubs. Well, yes, but you also invested in a ridiculous house with 3 houses together, which is, people refer to as Wayne Manor, like the Batman's place. He's got an artificial golf club in the basement. He's got a giant place outside Tokyo. He's got a huge place in California. I mean, this is a man, he drinks the best wine, Romani Conti La Tâche. It's about $6,000 to $10,000 a bottle. He always puts that out. He gets the best sushi from the Tokyo fish market. Some people say that full fish costs $35,000. I mean, and an American who talked to the chef and said, what do you do with the rest of it? Because the chef has to go out and buy it at 4 o'clock in the morning. He said, well, there are some benefits of being the chef, Obviously sells it to the other restaurants. But I mean, money does matter to Masa, but I think the status is more important. He also wants to be number one.
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks big. He really wants to be number one, not just number one wealthiest in Japan.